Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm sorry for the delay. I just gave a whole nice 5-minute welcome and then realized I wasn't actually talking to you. So I apologize for the delay, but I'm glad that we are all here now. My name is Sari Heidenreich, and I'm the Regional Coordinator with United Religions Initiative in North America. And the lovely faces that you see on your screen are our panelists, who are going to be joining us today to share information to empower community leaders, faith leaders, and interfaith leaders to work against human trafficking in their communities. It's my privilege now to welcome Bob and Fran German, who are joining us from North Carolina, where they are longtime members of the United Religions Initiative of Henderson County Cooperation Circle. They've been involved in anti-human trafficking efforts for about 7 years now, and have founded the Bob and Fran ACT project, with ACT standing for Abolish Child Trafficking, to raise awareness and funds. And they're going to lead us in an opening blessing.
So let's focus together just for a minute. You know, we were taught that slavery ended 150 years ago, but it didn't. In fact, there are more slaves today than ever before in history. Slavery, now better known as human trafficking, continues to occur throughout the world, especially wherever we find impoverished, uneducated people. It is estimated that there are between 30 and 36 million human beings living in slavery today. It's not legal anywhere, but exists everywhere in the world.
Modern-day enslavement can take many forms. A 7-year-old child soldier in Uganda, young boys laboring 12 to 14 hours a day in the brickyards of Nepal, kids in Africa harvesting the cocoa bean crop for your favorite chocolate candy, and here in North America, thousands are trafficked yearly into a life of prostitution under the threat of violence. Slaves are cheap, reusable, and disposable. Today, the average cost of a slave worldwide is just $90. The economic impact of human slavery often leads to corruption and bribery, while the authorities look the other way. Money talks. Police are on the take, politicians are crooked, business leaders are greedy, and traffickers are making millions. All this is happening while the vulnerable and the enslaved too often seem to be forgotten. These forgotten people exist in every country on our planet.
So let's always remember these forgotten people. Let us all do something to stop the trafficking now. Let us all share our prosperity with them through kindness and generosity. Let us all be proactive in empowering them. And at this moment, let us all connect energetically with powerful, positive thoughts, feelings, and prayers to attract change in their lives so they can become the light in a world that is often quite dark.
Thank you so much, Bob and Fran, for centering us in that way. We're going to move now into the information portion of our webinar. And before we do that, I just want to take a moment. Bob and Fran have centered us spiritually. I want to center our intention. And today we're going to be discussing human trafficking, which is a problem around the world and also right here in North America. Each of our panelists has experience dealing with this firsthand and is going to share with you what they've learned. Sorry, just one second. And our first speaker is going to be Eliza Morales. But before we get to her, I just want to give you a brief overview of who is hosting this call and why. I work for an organization called United Religions Initiative. We're the world's largest grassroots interfaith network, and we have 699 cooperation circles in 85 countries. We have roughly 60 in North America with roughly an additional 60 affiliates. If you'd like to find out how to join us, please contact me after the webinar. You'll have all of my information. And the mission of URI is to create cultures of peace and healing for the earth and all living beings. And so this naturally falls in line with our mission, because when people are enslaved, that is not a culture of peace nor of justice and healing. And so this webinar came to be when we noticed that cooperation circles around the world in North America were starting to talk about this topic. And we wanted to provide a service as the network that we are to help empower and amplify that work. So Elisa Morales is going to be our first panelist, and she is a New York New abolitionist and spokesperson to the Central New York Anti-Human Trafficking Force, in addition to a lot of other things. I will tell you that this woman emailed me about 11 p.m. at night one night saying, I just got done meeting with a trafficking victim and I'm meeting her at 4 a.m. to get her shelter. So she runs on very little sleep and lots of energy and lots of passion. And we are so grateful to have her here with us to share about her work and her passion for trafficking, as well as how you can use the tools that she has discovered over the years in your own community. Elisa, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Sari, and thank you all for joining us today to raise awareness and learning about how to combat human trafficking, which is a cause that's so passionate to my heart. Human trafficking does not discriminate. It can really happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime. America has an insatiable appetite for slavery. We contribute so much to the demands of labor and sex trafficking throughout the world, but also right here on American soil. For over a decade, I've been working with international victims, which are foreign nationals from other countries, and also with American citizens of all ages. You know, after so many years of doing this work, nothing surprises me, and unfortunately, there's a lot more work to be done, even though we have made some strides in combating slavery here in this country, as well as throughout the world. You know, the invisible people, they walk amongst us. You may not see the chains, but they're enslaved all the same. I find that labor and sex trafficking are very interconnected. You really don't find one unless you see the other. Just like domestic and sexual violence are very interwoven as well. And speaking about domestic violence, I also find in my experience that a lot of the power and control dynamics of domestic violence are very similar with human trafficking. So if you've ever seen that power and control wheel for domestic violence, human trafficking is all over it, with emotional, sexual, physical, psychological, financial abuse, and so many other things. Also in my experience, I find that domestic violence victims are trampled spirits, but I feel very strongly in what I've witnessed and what I've seen and what I've heard from the victims that I've worked with, that trafficking victims are actually broken spirits. But that's where I come in, to show people and inform them and let them know and share that there's help and there's hope, and that's why I dedicate my life to this cause. You know, there are a lot of people who cross borders who go to great lengths and sacrifice to try to come onto American soil in search of that American dream and a better life. I find many times that, you know, the risk of deportation is something that many people that are crossing those borders voluntarily are very fearful of. They don't want to be returned to their homeland where they're going to be experiencing the same dire circumstances. But I have found in recent years that deportation has a very terrifying twist. And it is that when people are deported, traffickers know about it, and they're on the homeland soil ready to intercept those people that are being deported and enslave them immediately on the spot. A lot of times families are broken apart and are sold separately into the sex and labor trade. This is something that happens every single day. When I meet with international victims or people from other countries here in America, I find that they're always in harm's way. Not only are they in harm's way, I'm in harm's way too. And I'm aware of that. I still find myself feeling very fortunate that I have come to be able to cross paths with so many people who have been able to transition. Also, I speak a little quickly. New Yorkers. It's New Yorkers. I'm a little Puerto Rican, going a little too quickly as well. So I'll try to slow down a little bit. because I don't want anyone to miss any of the information that we're sharing here today. I find that with meeting the international victims, a lot of times they're very, very afraid of their traffickers, and rightly so, because traffickers are their word. If they make a threat, they tend to follow through on it. So even when people are sold into slavery by their families, if their families are being threatened, if someone says, if you don't do what I say, when I say it, I'm going to harm your family, you know, victims know that they are their word. It's just a phone call to call back to the homeland and make sure that someone does get harmed. In addition, victims are being subjected to incredible abuse. They're also living, many of them, in very poor conditions, and others in incredibly good conditions, but they're still enslaved. They are not free to come and go as they please. Something that I find so challenging is that trafficking victims have a lot of fear instilled in them. There's a sense sometimes of obligation with a trafficker, and it's very hard to penetrate when people are, you know, to penetrate the fear that people are experiencing. One of the challenges I have is that sometimes I'm only going to meet that person one time. I know this is my one opportunity to instill some tools into people to get them help now, or give them the tools that they need as they're they're transiting. They're actually on the move, because this is merchandise. Human beings are considered merchandise, and merchandise is bought and sold every day. So I have a small window. One of the unique little tools that my creative little mind came up with that has saved countless lives is that, I assess a situation quickly, find out if a person is not coming with me to shelter or getting help right now, where they might be going. I share the National Human Trafficking Helpline or Hotline number often. And one of the ways that I found to share that is by singing the number and showing people the number on my telephone. A lot of trafficking victims are not educated. They can't read and write. Because I have such a small window, I find that, singing a number to the tune of a lullaby is very resourceful and is very easy for them to remember a number. So I might sing the trafficking hotline number like 888-373-7888. So what a trafficker hears when they go back to the trafficker and they're trying to remember that number is just a humming lullaby. So this has actually been a tool that I've used. I'm not sure where it came from. It came out of a light bulb went off in my head pretty quickly one day, and I've used it, and it really has helped a lot of people. I have found in my years that I've been working, and in this area, I live in the state of New York. I live in central New York, and we are a hub for internet virgins. The way that that works is that you will see an image of a young girl or boy, but in particular young girls, because virginity is a highly profitable industry here in America. You'll see a picture of them online, and a bidding war begins. And whoever the highest bidder is, usually $25,000 later, the person not only gets to take that child's virginity, but also gets to take them home. They get to clean their home and take care of their children and do whatever it is that they say. And again, they don't live in the best of conditions usually, and they're abused over and over again. The person who buys that virgin may also want to sell them forward. They've already got their virginity, they've gotten their high, they're on to the next person, just looking at the merchandise again, and the bidding war begins again. They also could sell that virginity over and over. Again, a newer trend that I've seen over the past few years, just in our own area, is that traffickers are taking that child's vagina and sewing it to mimic a hymen so that they can sell that child over and over and over again. These poor children are subjected to multiple partners in a day, always raped because they're not choosing this, enduring incredible pain and often not getting the medical care that they need. It's a horrible experience. I've met a lot of people who have come from that internet virginity industry and have been able to get out, thankfully, but they're not all out. So we still, like I say, have a lot of work to do. Americans spend a lot of money on foreign nationals, but let's face it, America is a melting pot. We don't have to go far to find what it is that we're looking for if we're looking for some diversity. So that means our own American citizen children are at risk more and more every day. Traffickers are at our schools, they're at our malls, they're everywhere, that they're on the internet, they're everywhere that our children are frequenting. Parents in America are selling their children every day. I've seen parents that have sold their children, and when I say children, I mean their teens, their children, their toddlers, even their infants, in exchange for iPads, laptops, rims, cell phones, you name it. There's an exchange value for that. Even pay their rent. You know, have sex with my child. I can't pay my rent this month. Let's call it even. Unfortunately, I see a lot of that every single day. Foster parents are rehoming. Rehoming is the secret swap between a foster child who goes from one home that they're placed in and then are temporarily placed within the sex trade industry, from home to home to home, having sex with these children and making money for them. Americans are also breeding children. And, okay, I'm seeing time too. I could talk about this all day, all night. Pregnancies are being terminated sometimes because that they can have them so that they can control them. But sometimes those pregnancies are not profitable, or they stand in the way of making some sort of profit. So sometimes they are, you know, unfortunately, they are being terminated. So where do we find trafficking? Everywhere. In natural disasters, the Super Bowl, colleges, offices, you name it. I was asked to speak about some red flags, and I'm going to ask Sari to allow me to put that on the, to share that afterwards. You know, we'll put it on the website. Unfortunately, I ran out of time, and I want to hear our other speakers, so we'll see if I could chime in somewhere down the line.
Sure. Thank you so much, Elisa, for that presentation, which it just it gets you in the gut, and not a nice way. And it's so hard to believe that these things are happening in our country and anywhere in the world, but specifically to think about them happening here right under our noses. I've put some of the red flags up here on the screen for you to view just briefly, but also I forgot to mention this at the beginning. I'm putting together a resource and action packet, which has resources from all of our speakers, as well as additional resources from well-known and well-respected human trafficking, anti-human trafficking organizations online. And so you'll be getting all of that. So if you can't find time or aren't able to scribble down everything the panelists are saying, totally fine. We have you covered. We'll be sending out this information immediately following the call. So be sure just to listen to the gist of what our panelists are saying, and we'll get that information to you after it's over. Our next speaker today is going to be Gail Hamilton. She is the National Director of the Safe Haven Campaign and Vice President of the Global Peace Foundation. Gail, when I met her and invited her to be a part of this webinar, she enthusiastically, despite not knowing me before this, enthusiastically accepted. And I'm so grateful for her presence with us here today to talk about how our faith communities really can play an active role in fighting human trafficking. So, Gail, I will hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Sari, and I just want to thank everyone on this call and thank United Religions Initiative for doing this, because it's a difficult issue, isn't it? It just is emotionally difficult. So I really respect that you're taking your time today to join with us here, and perhaps some of you have some understanding of the issue, and for others it may be new, so you may hear some shocking things. But I really want to share in my portion of the time that everyone can do something in this issue. So around the country now, there are faith communities, which we call safe havens, and it's when a faith community makes a commitment to educate themselves, their entire community, to the best of their ability, and in a lot of different ways they do this creatively, each faith community. And once they have educated themselves to to a certain degree, then they can become a catalyst for a broader-based public awareness. And this is something that we all can do, because there's a tendency, if you see, if you read something in the newspaper or you see a program on TV and it's so heartrending and shocking, there's a tendency to think, well, what can I do? And to feel rather hopeless. But the thing that all of us can do is to educate ourselves, because this is an egregious debasement of our humanity, and it's been under the radar forever, for so long, and now it's coming out into the light, and we need to be able to have a basic understanding of the issue. Then we will begin to see things in our own neighborhood. Could I have the next slide, please? In our own neighborhood, we may see something. Can you go to the next one, please? There are two places a trafficking victim is more likely to show up without her trafficker or pimp: a hospital emergency room, and the other is a house of worship. I found this quote online. Originally, it's a sentence from a State Department document, and I couldn't find the source of it. But frankly, after a couple of years doing this, approaching faith communities, doing trainings in mosques and churches and synagogues, I've come to hear so many stories that I have my own source of information now. Like, for example, I was speaking to an assistant to an imam in the National Mosque here in Washington, D.C., and as I described human trafficking and the challenge that we face here in America, his eyes got bigger and bigger. He had no idea that this was happening. And in fact, D.C. is a hub for trafficking, and the mosque that he was working at was just a few blocks from the track where those who are prostituted, are. So he was so shocked, and then he began to look so sad, and he told me about a story that during the day he drives a taxi, and he got a call from a young woman who wanted to come to Jumu'ah prayer. So he went to pick her up at a hotel, and there was a big burly guy with her, and he said to her, bring her right back after prayer. And so unfortunately, this assistant imam, he did bring her back after prayer, and he felt so bad after understanding more about the issue of trafficking. He felt so bad because had he had an understanding and a knowledge of this issue, then he wouldn't have taken her back. He could have asked her a few questions. So as faith communities, it's so important to have a basic understanding, because community tips lead to cases. Could I have the next slide, please? When I began this work, I myself didn't understand how important prevention is. That in the anti-trafficking movement, we talk about the 3 Ps: prevention, prosecution, and protection. Actually, there's another P, partnership, because we're all working together, which doesn't always happen, and so that's the hopeful thing. But nevertheless, I'm here in D.C., where a lot of nonprofits have their headquarters. I'm able to go to conferences at Homeland Security, Administration of Children and Families, and they are the federal agency that is tasked with rescuing and restoring victims. So all of these nonprofits and federal agencies are doing a fantastic job, but we have to understand that we're in a crisis mode, because we're finally seeing this, for the first time. So there's not that much time or money or attention to go to prevention. And actually, with all of us, if we take even what we learned today and we tell 5, 10 people what we have learned today and just be a catalyst for people to begin to do their own research and have an understanding, this public awareness can lead and does lead to community tips. So on your screen, you can see 2 billboards. If you look at the one on the left, look really closely. It says, "Hey students, need a summer job? Date a sugar daddy." So that billboard, a Safe Haven, a Baptist church in Birmingham, Alabama, sent me this picture, and that billboard was put up between 2 middle schools in Birmingham. And the website is a thinly veiled escort service. It's like a porn. The homepage is pornographic. So I think that this billboard is a prime example of incredibly poor public awareness, and that church got together a coalition and had it taken down. So then on your right, you see a different billboard, and this was in Baltimore, and this is an example of proactive public awareness. So Elisa mentioned the crisis hotline number, which you can see there running along the bottom of the billboard. So it's really important for all of us to disseminate this number in any way and every way we possibly can. And I'm sure that a flyer with that number will be a part of the package from this webinar. So I've been working with the Human Trafficking Task Force here in Northern Virginia, and I've come to understand they actually have tracked how, as the public awareness raises and people, come down to be able to make these calls to the hotline and to the police, then we can really see the correlation between public awareness and community tips, and the tips lead to actual cases. So, Sari, can you do the whole slide, please? So, the primary tool of the Safe Haven campaign is what you see this imam holding in his hand, and it's a small group study series, and it has 4 films. They're 12 to 13 minutes long, and it has a study guide and discussion questions, and most importantly, it has action steps. And this is what we've been using, which has worked really well, because if you're in a remote area where perhaps you don't have access to somebody who can come and give you a training about the issue of human trafficking, you can utilize this small group study series. You could have a meeting in your home with 3 people. You could have a meeting at your faith community with 300 people. You can just put the film in your computer, or if you have a projector and speakers, you can do this in a hall, and you work through these 4 sessions, and you'll end up with a basic understanding of human trafficking. You'll be able to have some sense of identifying victims, what kind of questions to ask, and can you go to the last slide, please? And I would really encourage you to see what nonprofits or what agencies are in your, oh sorry, the one before that. Yeah, we were fortunate because we're here in DC. We had a lot of partners that we could work with. So this is something that you all can do as well. And I'm definitely here to help you if you need contact information or know who to connect to. But everybody on this call has fantastic resources, so that each and every faith community could really become a catalyst and bring broader-based public awareness to your neighborhoods and to your communities. And I think I've hit my time.
You have, and thank you so much for sharing with us this tool, and for our audience to know that we're actually going to be giving away one of those community small group study series guides. I have it here in my hand, and we'll be giving one of these away to an attendee on the webinar, so check your emails afterwards. You might be the lucky winner. They're also available from Global Peace Foundation, and your resource packet will have a link to that. So our next speaker is going to be Pastor Troy Martinez. He is in the Las Vegas, Nevada area, and he is a pastor in that community, but he has also produced an Emmy-nominated documentary called Trafficked No More. He's also a member of a URI cooperation circle called the Interfaith Council of Southern Nevada. He runs a nonprofit called 10,000 Kids. I could go on and on. This wonderful man and his daughter has helped along the way in preparation for this webinar, and they've just been wonderful to work with, and really excited to hear from them some more. So Pastor Troy, I just invite you to turn on your webcam. We'll unmute you here, and you can begin your presentation. And just a reminder, we've got 7 minutes for each of you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I have Christian here help me on the tech side, so is everything visible and audio? Can you hear clearly?
We can hear you.
Is the audio on?
We're great.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, everybody, for inviting me. I was nominated by the Children's Advocacy Alliance, which is a major player here in the city, being advocates for children, and specifically Gar Jameson, who's not only the founder of the CAA, but he is a good friend and one of the sponsors of the documentary Traffic No More. And as Gail was speaking, she was saying something about everybody can do something, and I agree with that completely. And I just want to kind of add to that, we need a lot of everybody's. And the way we got to where we're at today was because a lot of people statewide did something. Some did some very major things, some did some small things, and everything in between, which accomplished the good work that has been accomplished so far. And what I want to do is kind of start off with a story that happened recently and describe that, and then tell you how that success story came about by the collaborative work. It was the Christmas Eve that just passed. We were here at home, my daughter and my children, my 9 grandchildren were sitting around the fireplace. We opened presents on Christmas Eve, and it was literally a picture-perfect postcard, if you will. And we got a call from a nonprofit in California that had received a call from a mother that was looking for her approximately 20-year-old daughter that was missing from Los Angeles, had left there with a known gang member, and had been transported to Las Vegas for what they called the season sex trafficking uptick. And once she got here, this young lady, she was being tortured, she was being forced to have sex, she was waterboarded in toilet water, her hair was set on fire at one point, she was beaten repeatedly, she was actually arrested for prostitution, and when she was let out, the pimp would re-engage her, and her family did not know anyone in Vegas, she didn't know anyone in Vegas, but there was a network here that had been built up over the years. So on this particular Christmas Eve, because of this phone call and knowing the desperation of the situation, this young lady had been threatened to be killed by the pimp because he felt she wasn't cooperating in the way he expected. She was able to connect directly with us, and because we had built up partnerships with both law enforcement and houses that receive victims, we were able to put in a plan to get her rescued. She was able to pretend she was going out on a date, and she was going to escape, run away to a public place. We had someone there that was going to pick her up and take her directly to a shelter. There was one of our collaborative partners, so they would know how to work with her and deal with the victimization and traumatization. And what had happened is when she got to the location, which happened to be a bus station, the pimp had got a couple of his gang member partners in a car, and they were searching the neighborhood. They located her. She locked herself in the bathroom, and they kicked the bathroom door down. They put her over the shoulder of one of the gang members and was taking this victim to put her in the trunk to drive her away to kill her, to make her an example to the other girls. Because of the partnership, the bus station was already alerted to pay attention, watching for this girl. We had one of our workers on the way to meet her, and law enforcement also was involved. So they kind of all showed up at the same time, and the gang member threw her on the floor, fled, and got in the getaway car and escaped. And the police officer, instead of in the past where they would just put her in cuffs and take her away, they looked at her as what she was, a victim. And not only did the police officer know us personally from all the work, but because of the partnership with the police department, they had been in many briefings talking about the culture change that was taking place, looking at these young ladies as victims and not just as criminals. And so she was immediately allowed to be released, taken to the shelter. She spent several months in the shelter here, then was transferred to the shelter in California, and eventually reunited with her mother. And so we were very excited to see that type of a rescue, and know that if all this work that started back in 2011 for our campaign would have never given her the opportunity to see another day and die a horrible death. So in saying all that, in 2011 we met with a vice lieutenant. Her name was Karen Hughes, and we asked to hear from her what their needs were. And then we began to put together a template that how we would put a statewide campaign together if a law was going to be passed in 2013 that would make sex trafficking a crime in the state of Nevada. Prior to that, there was no law in the book saying sex trafficking was a crime. And so many of the faith-based organizations partnered with the then Attorney General of Nevada, and that law was passed, signed by the governor. And that gave us the trigger to start the awareness campaign, because no one knew about this law. I mean, it was on the books, but even law enforcement, it takes sometimes months and years for them to get the word and the training about when laws change. So one of our blessings here is that we had over the years built up partnership with our mayor, with our sheriff, with many law enforcement officials, our U.S. Attorney of Nevada, many of the nonprofits, the schools, and we were able to bring all those players together, so to speak, to collaborate with us to show this documentary that was being produced. And it was Vegas-centric, and it was up-to-date information, and it was based on a true story, or true events, I should say, and it was put together and aired on every major television station statewide on January 22nd in 2014, just as the new law came out. So it gave people an awareness like never before. One of the most recent, just a couple of weeks ago, there was 40 Chinese nationals that were in one location, and most of them didn't speak any English. They were being trafficked, and a citizen reported it. So those girls were rescued because a citizen, because of the awareness, made that call. The police had no idea that location. It was recent, and they didn't know it existed, but citizens are now aware that those type of situations are not normal. there's something much more evil going on. And so a citizen rescued 40 girls by making one phone call. So that's what we want to see, and that we believe that the templates and the tools that we have compiled, and when I say we, I mean many collaborative partners, can help in any community. One of the things that we were able to do is create a booklet. I don't know if you could see it. It's the Traffic No More hand booklet. And what happens is the law enforcement agencies train health teachers, and they show a 12-minute clip of the video that we produced, and then they have a discussion with this handbook that has much of the information that we were talking about now, and it also has the national hotlines, so those are free, provided to the school. So we created a multiplication process. So we figured we can't do this alone. We don't have enough resources. There's not enough money to hire 100 people or 1,000 people. But we have the 5th largest school district in the nation. So the school district is actually teaching this in the school district time slots, and the multiplication process is in motion. Additionally,
thank you so much, Pastor Troy. I'm going to have to cut you off, and I want to get into more specifics on the school program, and I think that will come out in our Q&A.
Okay.
So thank you, and we're going to move on here to our next panelist. And just in summary, Pastor Troy's got really great resources on a statewide awareness campaign that he and several others were involved in and running, as well as the documentary and these school booklets. Again, all of that is going to be in your resource packet, so you'll have all of that available. The next person who's going to speak with us is Beatrice Kahn. She's the Vice President of the National Council of Jewish Women and Chair of Exodus, their anti-sex trafficking initiative. And again, she's someone who I didn't know prior to working on this, but she has just jumped in with both feet and has a wonderful presentation for us. So Beatrice, if you just want to turn on your webcam and you can begin your presentation.
Okay, hi. Thank you, Sari and URI. The National Council of Jewish Women has a long history of fighting sex trafficking, going back over 100 years. Recently, NCJW again made it a national priority. Last October, we launched Exodus, NCJW's anti-sex trafficking initiative. And Sari, do you have the slides? Great, thank you. Taking to heart our history as slaves in Egypt and our belief that no one should be exploited as we once were, NCJW aims to expose this hidden and complex issue through a powerful program of public awareness, education, and advocacy. As we have experienced liberation and freedom, it is our mandate to ensure our communities and laws respond to those trapped in our midst. Everyone deserves a life life of freedom from sexual exploitation, coercion, and violence. And sorry, slide 2, please. Our goals for Exodus's first year include educating our communities across the U.S., building public awareness among decision makers that include and people on the front line, such as law enforcement, doctors, teachers, clergy, working to ensure that existing laws are enforced, which you just heard how important that is from Pastor Troy, advocating at the local, state, and federal levels on new legislation that affects trafficking, and creating easy-to-use toolkits for the grassroots. Our hope is that education and awareness will build public outrage and build the will to take action against traffickers and in support of survivors. Most of what I'm going to say is available on the Exodus website, and some of it has a distinctly Jewish framework, but it's easily adaptable to any community. Feel free to download and distribute anything you can use. All we ask is that you credit NCJW for whatever we've created. On your screen, I think you can now see the Exodus landing page. And to the right are links to the resources. Sorry, can you show the next slide, please? The first link is called Explore the Action Kit and takes you to a summary of the ready-made, easy-to-use toolkits that are in Exodus. And what better way to inform people than a movie? So in Exodus, we have a planning guide for screening the powerful documentary Trick, which can be purchased for a reduced price from our website. There's step-by-step instructions and discussion questions to engage the audience after the screening. Similarly, the toolkit has a list of titles for an issue-themed book club, as well as event planning tips and discussion questions for 3 excellent books. Inviting a panel of those already working in your community against trafficking can enhance these and other events. Law enforcement, service providers, even NCJW members are usually eager to share their time and experience. A big component of Exodus is advocacy. We have identified 3 state laws we think every state should have as a baseline to prevent trafficking and help survivors. Exodus contains fact sheets on each of these laws and tips for introducing legislation, making appointments with legislators, and having successful meetings. And you don't have to be an expert to lobby. You merely need to be passionate and tell your story. And you'll probably find it very empowering to be part of social change that way. Exodus also contains sample sermons, letters to the editor, op-ed pieces, Facebook posts, tweets, and graphics, all there for you to adapt. There's a template for creating your action plan, tips on getting your letter to the editor published, a guide to working in partnership with others, and more. I want to highlight the program bank that's in Exodus. There, NCJW chapters, or we call them sections across the country, share their ideas and successes. Combating trafficking looks different from community to community, and the program bank provides an array of strategies that have been used in different places. One project, called Trafficking, comprises life-size cardboard silhouettes of teens with stories of how they became victims of sex trafficking. They can be placed in a public space, and there's an informative handout in several languages that goes with the installation. It's a great way to educate your community. Another project entails printing the National Trafficking Hotline number on sticky notes and giving them to people to post in public spaces. Again, the how-tos are on the Exodus site. And finally, I want to tell you about We Were Slaves. The Jewish Community Unites Against Sex Trafficking. NCJW New York section chairs the coalition and maintains the website, which has additional great resources. There are toolkits for clergy, educators, and others. And sorry if you could just give the slide that shows the web address for that. Thank you. The tools include Bible text studies, sermon ideas, survivors' testimonies, action ideas, and detailed information about how traffickers ensnare our children. Again, feel free to use anything on the site. Just credit We Were Slaves and the originator of the materials. NCJW believes that the faith-based community in general, and in our case, the Jewish voice in particular, must be heard on the issue of trafficking. Because we were slaves in Egypt, we have a familiar understanding of the degradation that accompanies slavery, and therefore cannot stand idly and watch as others are violated. Instead, we must protect the sanctity of every life created in God's image. Indeed, we're commanded to redeem we're commanded to redeem the captive, to enforce a fair labor system, and to take care of the most vulnerable among us. Thus, trafficking demands our response. So please use the NCJW Exodus Toolkit to make an impact on this monstrous crime. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. Really appreciate your presentation. And as you see, like Beatrice has very easy, write out the hotline number on a sticky note and just place them places. In your resource packet, there's some ideas of, for example, hospital workers or healthcare workers, people in the hospitality industry. Those are really target places where you might run into victims of trafficking. So have these ideas in your mind. Beatrice has resources in the guide as well that take you from everything from getting legislation passed in your state, again, to those sticky notes. So it's a continuum of action, and know that there's something for everyone who's on this call and anyone who might be listening afterwards to get involved. We're going to move into a question and answer time, so please do start putting your questions in via the question box. And what we'll do is, because we're running up against our time, we'll answer some questions now, and then if we have leftover questions, our panelists have agreed to stay on for an extra 30 minutes and answer questions as they come in, so we can really have more of a back and forth conversation. So don't worry, don't not put in a question because you don't think we'll get to it. We're really going to do our best to get to them all. And we'll start doing that now. So if each of my presenters would put on their webcam, we're just going to start asking questions to you. One that came in, and I'm not sure which of you is best to answer this, so please just chime in as is appropriate. But can you elaborate on the direct connection between human sex trafficking and the seemingly harmless pornography that many of us men patronize every day? And Pastor Troy, I do think that was part of your presentation, so I don't know if maybe you want to start speaking to that and then let the other panelists chime in as well.
Okay, you want me to start with that?
Yes.
I have a slideshow. Can you put that up?
Yes, sure, I can.
We have a wonderful partner,
If you want to share your camera as well, then we'll be able to see your face.
Okay.
There we go.
If you could start that slideshow.
Sure.
It's Pastor Aaron Hansel. He is a wonderful collaborative partner. He's the co-producer of the documentary, but he also is the founder of the Demand Project. And the Demand Project targets men regarding pornography. And one of the reasons we have recognized this, and we have statistics that are huge indicators, is just recently in our city, we asked the U.S. Attorney in Nevada, the FBI, Homeland Security, and others that have partnered with our local sheriff department on a sting operation for 6 months. And they made about 200 arrests. They recovered 500,000 pornographic images of children, talking about minors. About 2,739 videos, children, talking about minors. This was just in a 6-month period. So one of the things communities can do is ask their local law enforcement, what are they seeing in recent times? Again, that was a 6-month window recently in our community. And so it brought a very sobering perspective to all that are involved. You see here Pastor Aaron's slide that he provided to us. Porn is a big problem. It's destroying lives, and it's, we believe, fueling human trafficking. If we can change the demand, this is his mantra. If we can change the demand, then we can change what's happening to the victim. But the key is to reduce the demand by healing men. Most men are the ones that are the buyers of these young boys and young girls. And so he has created this free 30-day program. It has action steps, and it helps men get through the issue of pornography. And it's delivered. What they did is they attempted to do this locally, like in churches, and no one would show up. Everybody's too ashamed or embarrassed, or are definitely not going to admit. But when they did it online, they had hundreds and then thousands of people lining up to be part of the demand. So we truly believe it is a proactive approach, and that without stopping the demand, the supply will just continue. And the more everyone understands demand and supply, the more violent, the more aggressive the the recruiting processes will be. And someone mentioned earlier about the diverse groups that men choose. In our local community, the majority of minors, mainly female, that are being recruited into the sex industry are from our local community.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and I think that's a very important point. You know, if there was not demand for these slaves, then they would not be in existence. And we're running up right against our time, but we do still have questions coming in. So what I want to do is just share a couple of comments that have come in, and then I'm going to ask Pastor Troy to close us in a brief blessing so that if you do need to leave us at this time, you can do so feeling complete. But those of us who are able are going to stay on and keep answering questions. So one really clever note that came in from one of our attendees, and she's also one of the board members at URI North America, was take the sticky notes, place them on the inside of the bathroom stalls. These are one places where women are alone and safe. So that was really clever. Take them with you, keep them in your purse, and just put them in the stalls when you're in bathrooms and public places. Another note coming from Maria Crespo, who is also a URI employee in Argentina, and she says, in Argentina, trafficking is related to drug circulation and government corruption. And she's wanting us to have a conversation about that, if that's the case in other countries. So I'm giving you a little teaser, some incentive to stay on after Pastor Troy closes us. So we'll get to those questions in a moment, and I'm going to hand it over to Pastor Troy to close. But just a reminder, look to your email this afternoon. You'll be getting everything, including the slides, all the resources. Some of the presenters have provided prepared remarks. You'll get copies of those, and you'll also get each other's contact information if you elected to have your contact information shared. That way, you could work to build a coalition, see who's on the call, who's in your community, or who's working across the country that you want to connect with and share best practices with. So all that information will be coming your way this afternoon via email, as well as a recording of this that you can share around your community. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our panelists. And Pastor Troy, would you please close us with a short blessing?
Yes, I like the way you said short. Lord, we come before you and we humble ourselves. We repent of the sins of our nation, the sins of our father's household, and the sins, Lord, that we have committed to those that are most vulnerable. We ask you forgive us. We ask you give us wisdom to fight against this crime, and at the same time, humility to partner with others. And we pray, Lord, that you would allow us to make a difference in lives when there's someone crying out to you and praying and saying, send me help, that we would be answered to that prayer. And we thank you, Father, for who you are. You said your arm is not shortened that it can reach down and help the sons of men. Amen.
Thank you so much, Pastor Troy. So if you need to leave us at this time, please do. If you can stay on for some more questions, we're going to get this conversation going. So let's go to the question that came out of Argentina. Have we seen this? Is this a case in the communities that you work in? Is there a connection between drug or government corruption and trafficking?
I can.
Please.
I think I can speak to that a little bit. Just recently put on a program for 3 states for the Lutheran Convention, Lutheran Women's Group, and one of the speakers was the Assistant Attorney General, and he was the prosecutor of a lot of traffickers in this area, and so he focused his talk on how human trafficking is rising in this area, particularly because gangs are transferring from drug trafficking to human trafficking. And he actually got down to the practical details of, you know, how much it costs to buy drugs and then sell them, as opposed to, you know, getting a girl, and if she's rescued, it's easy to get another girl, and drugs are sold one time and then they're gone, whereas a girl can be sold over and over. And so he gave all these statistics of how the gangs in this area, which are out of El Salvador and MS-16, and I forgot the names of all of them, but yeah, unfortunately, there is less capital involved, and it's actually easier, and there's less risk to do human trafficking as opposed to drug trafficking.
Thank you for speaking to that. And I want to ask Bob and Fran, if I think they're still on the line. Do you have any experience on this that you wanted to share as well?
Well, yes. We've had a lot of experience. We live in Thailand, in northern Thailand, for several months each year, and have for many years. And we spend most of our time doing anti-trafficking work. I can tell you firsthand that when we go up to the hill tribes in northern Thailand, up in the Burmese, near the Burmese border, it is rife with drug traffickers and human traffickers. So we definitely see a connection. We have to, when we go up there, we take a bodyguard with us. It can be scary. But we also see drug traffickers shifting the focus onto human trafficking because it's more lucrative. So yeah, we see that a lot, and I'm sure it goes on in Africa and the Himalayas and India for sure.
Thank you, Bob, for speaking to that. And I know here in California, what I've heard is that, unfortunately, the penalties for human trafficking are actually less than the penalties for drug trafficking. And so traffickers, it's less risky for them to traffic human beings than it is for drugs. And so like you're saying, they're switching industries, which is kind of makes you sick to your stomach. Elisa, I believe she wanted to chime in on the question about pornography and the demand. Elisa, why don't you speak to that?
Okay. One of the things I wanted to briefly point out is that although there are people who willingly partake in the pornography industry, you have to keep in mind every single time that someone chooses to look at porn, that those faces that are smiling at you, that look like they're enjoying what they're doing, the majority of them are actually forced or tricked into doing that. When you look at it from that perspective, it may not seem as enjoyable maybe as you initially may have thought. But with all the clients, you know, all of the victims that I've worked with who are now survivors, that's one of the things that, you know, they'd like for me to point out is that even, you know, who were in the porn industry, that even though it looks like something is, you know, it's agreeable to them and they look like they're having fun and they're smiling and everything in those pornographic pictures and things, a lot of them are underage and a lot of them may not look like it, but they are, and they mostly were forced. Some of them were tricked, you know, being so young as they are, especially with our American citizen kids. But just keep that in mind. You know, do you really want to support something that is contributing to such a crime? Because the chances are really high that that image you're seeing is someone who's enslaved.
Thank you.
I'm going to have to join us from the telephone because my computer is about to walk away.
Okay, thank you, Elisa. We'll wait for you to rejoin on the telephone. I want to move too because a big part of what we want this webinar to be is not only to hit us in the gut and make us feel like this is terrible, we want to leave feeling empowered, feeling like there is something we can do. So we have a comment here from Alma Goodwin who says she's in the beginning stages of working with a faith-based entity on incorporating human trafficking into their programs. And she said that a lot of good information and resources were shared today. I want to circle back to each of the panelists because I know each of you were struggling to stay within your 7 minutes. If you could tell a community, I was going to say one, maybe I'll give you two. Like, what would be your top 2 things, really practical steps for empowerment? If someone's on this call and they're saying, I want to start something in my community, how should they get started? And we'll start with you, Gail, because Elisa's going to join us on the phone, and we'll just work our way around.
Well, call me. I'd love to talk with you. And if they're able to get the small group study series, it's available at cost for $8. Then they can go through that in short order and have a basic understanding of the issue, and then from there, share with larger groups. Beatrice also has fantastic resources on her website. So I think the first step is educate oneself, but don't get hung up by thinking that you have to be some kind of expert, because I'm certainly not, but I've been able to share a lot with a lot of people.
Thanks, Gail. Pastor Troy?
Did you say you want Alyssa to go next because she had to leave?
Oh, sure. Alyssa, you want to go ahead?
Sure. In addition to educating yourself, make sure you share that information. Volunteer. Trafficking victims are everywhere, so they could be amongst the human service agencies. They could be in the court systems. They could be at soup kitchens or food kitchens and things. They're really everywhere, so you want to volunteer to the causes that are helping victims, definitely, but really anywhere that you are, you're going to find that there are victims. So volunteering is really, really important. And also, something that you could do is share a smile. I didn't get a chance to share a survivor story. I'm going to give it to Sari so she can post it afterwards, but you never know the power of a smile that you might share with someone, that it could impact their life and make them feel human for even a moment. And when you do read the story, you'll understand that better. And also, whether you pray, meditate, send positive energy, definitely keep the victims in mind, the people who are helping those victims. I don't have the safest job in the world, so I'm definitely looking for that positive energy to stay safe. And also, make sure that you pray for those traffickers and the people who are buying and selling so that they can stop this crime and see people as human beings.
Thank you, Alyssa. Pastor Troy, you'll go next.
Thank you. You definitely, in my opinion, you need to start with law enforcement. You gotta speak to someone in law enforcement that's going to give you a clear perspective of what's really going on in your community, and they have statistics. If I said that right. And there's a lot of misconceptions, but the numbers don't lie. And you can take those numbers, see how they apply to your community, and then that would be number one. And you may not get that on the first try. You might have to reach out to several different law enforcement partners in different areas, whether it's vice or community relations or crimes against children, but figure that out in your own community and get that done. Secondly, you have to build some sort of coalition. And like you heard earlier, don't expect the experts to be the only ones you reach out to, because those experts are already busy. They've been in whatever field, and sometimes they have a silo or a box, and we really need to, this is much bigger than any one group can handle or take on. So yes, include the experts, but do not underestimate the passionate grandparent. Don't underestimate the concerned citizen, and start with a very small coalition and just begin to build. And it'll organically, and like someone said, pray, and it'll organically begin to develop. And like you heard earlier, there's plenty of good models, templates, and other things that are offered. Take those and see how they may overlap or apply in your own.
Thank you, Pastor Troy. And I think you started as a concerned grandparent, if I've read your story correctly. So yes, never underestimate that power. Beatrice, would you like to go next?
Yes, thanks. I would of course start by going to Exodus. You can start there with we have a one-page everything you want to know about sex trafficking, which you can use to educate yourself and also share with anybody that you can talk. The more people you talk about this with, the greater the public awareness and the more action we'll see. I think it's also important to speak to the children in your own community. I think prevention is something that we need to focus on as well, and educating youth about it. And I think that a person, especially a young person, may not recognize that he or she is being trafficked, but her friends might. And so I think it's really important to be looking out for the kids in the community, to educate them, to talk to them, and don't assume it doesn't happen here. So educate yourself, everybody you know, but talk to your kids.
Thank you. Thank you, Beatrice. Bob, do you have anything that you'd like to add? Oh, you were muted, so you want to start again from the beginning of your sentence?
Yes, I am more into international trafficking. Of course, I have an interest in North America as well. But I am for each of us trying to affect the supply line of companies that we invest in and buy from. Mm-hmm. I would suggest that one little thing people could do is buy fair trade products as opposed to non-fair trade products. That would be maybe coffee or chocolate or sugar. And this way, it's a wake-up call to businesses that use child labor or even adult labor slaves in the supply line. So that's one suggestion. I also think it's a good idea to think about making a monetary donation to those nonprofit organizations in your community and around the world who are actively in the field countering the trafficking that's going on.
Thank you, Bob. And I'll just add my little easy tip. In the packet you're going to get, I've enumerated several resources to know the signs, so that when you're walking up and down the street and you see something that you think it doesn't feel right. Gail's talked about this. Our law enforcement don't have the time really right now to be doing proactive investigations. And so what they're operating off of are tips. And so calling that human trafficking hotline is so important. And I'm going to put up the red flags that Elisa shared with us on your screen just for a moment so that we can see those again. And these are going to be in your packet, like I said. But share these with everyone you know. Yesterday in putting this packet together, found resources for healthcare professionals, for teachers, for hospitality workers. My sister and my aunt are in the healthcare profession. So I sent them a training video on how to screen people that come into their office for these. There's also sources for lawyers. So I don't know how many healthcare workers we have on this call or how many lawyers, but I sure know that each of you probably knows someone who does those jobs. So please do share these resources and encourage the people in your community to screen their patients, screen their clients for these kinds of things. And remember that calling that trafficking hotline is the very best way to get this information. I've posted a poll on your screen that you can participate in that says, knowing these red flags, do you think you've ever encountered someone who's been a victim of trafficking? And I for sure think that I have. And the poll answers, only about 29% of you have voted, but no one has clicked no, which I think is just, wow. That means that probably each of us at some point have crossed paths with someone. And so what is the power of that if we would take the action to call the trafficking hotline or to ask someone, are you okay? Do you need help? Or to give them the number disguised as something else. One of the healthcare professionals was saying she writes it down as an x-ray place. She writes down the number that says, call this x-ray place. And it's really the human trafficking hotline number. So there are powerful things you can do no matter who you are. And so I just wanted to share that. That's my little spiel. I want to share a question, and I'm not sure anyone will have the answer, but I do want to share it. Someone asked, does anyone have information on whether there is any work being done in northern Iraq with the sex slaves who have escaped from ISIS? Do any of you have that international perspective or knowledge of that issue?
I can tell you that we've received reports that young virgin girls are offered to as a recruitment tool for adding soldiers to the ISIS army. It's very hard to get a lot of information out of countries like that, but that I believe is true. It's from a very good source, and another sad story.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And the woman who asked that was Mona Malik, and she works with closely on that issue. So the two of you may want to connect after the call, or if anyone else is interested in that issue, when you get her information after the call, connect with her if you would like. I am getting a question. Lisa, are you still on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I can hear you. We had a question come in asking about materials in Spanish, Creole, or French. I have a feeling you might be someone who could speak to this, but anyone else is welcome to answer as well. Do you have resources for materials and languages other than English?
You know, one of the biggest frustrations and challenges that I have in working with the international victims, which for me sometimes are not from Spanish-speaking countries or cultures, but speak Spanish, because they are trafficked into Spanish-speaking countries, and then after so many years develop the language and then end up in America. So I speak Spanish with them, even though they might be from Thailand or Russia or something like that. There are really limited resources that are in Spanish. That's one of the reasons why I brought up volunteerism as well. I voluntarily have taken time and helped different organizations to translate some of their materials into Spanish. A lot of times I'm on the go, so I'm doing this on the road, you know, just trying to translate materials, not just in Spanish because I speak Spanish, but in other languages if possible, to get those materials to people. So unfortunately, part of the challenge still is that we do not have enough materials that are in other languages. Spanish happens to be one of them that I utilize the most. So I could try to put together some of the resources that I'm aware of that, you know, or websites that do have information in Spanish. There's only a few. So, you know, if people are looking for something to do and they speak other languages, volunteer for the organizations that are helping victims so that they can, you know, get a head start and a jump on translating these materials into all languages, because we need things to be translated so that we can reach more people.
I'd like to add to that too, if I can. Going back to partnering the coalition, locally here, the Southern Nevada Health District helped professionally translate all of our material for the handbook into Spanish, because it was important for them, because they would see a bunch of girls lined up, the pimp would be sitting in the car, they take them to get contraceptives or another location to have abortions so they can continue using them. So having partners like that, for your website, you can just add Google Translate or another app that's similar, and someone going on can just click whatever language. And so there's some very simple ways with the modern technology. But having those partners that can do some of the material that's off the website, they did it for us for free, because it was not only part of their mission, but the law in our state says everything that they provide has to be done in Spanish and English.
Fantastic. And as well, the National Human Trafficking Hotline has services in over 200 languages. And so while that's not printed material, even if someone doesn't speak English, they can still call that hotline number and get service. So that is something important. And thank you for that. And Beatrice has also sent me a little note saying she knows of a brochure that's available in Spanish, Creole, and other languages. So we'll put a link to that in your resource packet as well. Are there any other questions from our audience? I'm out of ones that have come in. If you would, given that our number has gotten a bit smaller too, if you would like to ask your question verbally rather than speaking, just click the raise your hand button and I can open your microphone as well. So we'll give you a minute or two to do that, to put in any more last minute questions that you might have. All right, Mona has raised her hand, so I'm going to open the mic for her. Mona, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. I did write the question, but it might have not transferred to you already, so I'll just ask it. But this webinar was very informative regarding detecting trafficking and what to do as far as response goes. And will there be a follow-up on this webinar on information on how to help the victim and heal the victims psychologically, how to come back into the community without shame?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is beyond my scope, but I think that Elisa who works directly with victims, could probably speak to that, but anyone else as well who has experience in that, please chime in.
I will say that transitioning from a victim to a survivor is something that's going to vary from person to person as far as time frame and what that looks like, as well as if they're international victims who are learning a new language, a new culture, who may not even know that they're in America, someone who needs to know basic life skills even here in America. They don't know. I've had clients who have never seen a flushing toilet, which we take for granted, and they are just mesmerized by flushing it over and over again, as well as people who don't know how to take care of their own finances, who are used to making more money. I've had kids say, well, I pull $1,000 in a night. How much do you make, Elisa? Well, I don't make that, but I'm far more rewarded in what it is that I do. So, there's a lot of work that goes into helping a person during their healing process and transitioning. I think that coalition building and knowing who the players are who are in our local communities when we come in contact with a human trafficking victim is very important. Working with law enforcement and educating our community so that we're not re-victimizing victims, and so that also we have a flow to, from the first meeting and that first step forward into from a life of servitude to a life of freedom. It's very important to have partnerships. So, everyone has a role to play. You don't have to be the police. You don't have to be a legislator. We all are, playing our roles in this bigger picture. And it's just important to come together as an international community and, work together so that we can have the services and resources in place for people who are needing our help. And sometimes that's not even on from a professional perspective. That's even just, people who are friends with people and are seeing that they're in trouble and, can help them connect to resources, but are also their supports. Faith communities are so instrumental in this. And so I think the partnerships are really important to have, and knowing who the players are so that we can really give that best service to people and give them a shot at, reestablishing their lives.
Thank you, Elisa. Beatrice, I think you had something you wanted to add as well. Oh, I think you're on mute, so hold on.
Okay, I'm off mute. So survivors usually present with a very complex set of problems that almost always include post-traumatic stress disorder. Victims of trafficking present at the same rate and the same intensity as those who have soldiers who've seen active combat. They may also have drug addiction. They have often usually traumatic bonding with their traffickers, health issues from lack of health care, from malnutrition. They usually have wrecked finances. They're homeless. They, if you've been trafficked, the typical age of entry into the life is 12 to 14 years old, which means that many survivors have, a sixth grade education. So their education is behind, and their job prospects are few. They've had no modeling for a regular life. I mean, the nature of the illnesses, they're complex, they're severe, and it requires a comprehensive plan of many, many types of professionals. Volunteers can come in, can be helpful in providing mentoring, job skills training, and other financial training, and some of the things that Alyssa just mentioned. But it requires very specialized training on the part of the volunteer or provider, and lots of patience, because typical of the of having been in the life and also with the traumatic bonding is that they'll go back. They'll go back many times, and they'll be confrontational perhaps. And so it's important to understand if you do get involved, it's going to be trying, but really, really important. And it's a great way to volunteer, but it's not something you can easily jump into by yourself.
Thank you.
I'd like to add to that too. We got to make sure that we understand that the serving the victims that have come out of that lifestyle is almost an entirely different category than bringing the awareness, the prevention, and building the coalitions itself. And a major part of that is having, I would call it a menu of different service providers that can, take in the victims immediately and begin that work. And some victims will not go into a faith-based type of recovery program. Some will. Some prefer that. Some don't want to go into an in-house program at all. They want to be reunited with their family, and then we have to refer them out to outpatient services. So there is no one answer. But having all those partners, like was mentioned earlier, is critical, because you can rescue someone, but if you have nowhere for them to go, and even we've had discussions with police officers said when it comes to minor, some of the safest place they said was juvenile hall. And that was a truth at one point, and now we're growing beyond that. But I would not recommend that someone try to take that task on individually, or especially if that's not their specific calling and training.
I want to concur with Beatrice and Reverend Troy. That's excellent advice. Just one more point that, if you find out where the treatment service centers are nearest to you, and then just see if they need mentors, or if usually there's like a training, that's one way to go. But the Administration for Children and Families, on their website, they're tasked with the rescue and restore victims, so they have a list of coalitions all over the country, so that might be helpful.
Great. I'll add that to our resource packet if you want to send me the link before we leave. Maybe we could get a closing word, since we're at 11:30 now, and that's what you all committed to staying towards. A closing word from each of you, and then Gail, can I put you on the spot and have you go last and just kind of close us out? Okay, sounds good. Bob, do you want to say a closing word, and we'll just work our way around the screen?
Well, I just want to express my appreciation to URI for helping to raise awareness. This is a serious global issue. It's serious in small towns in America and biggies as well. So thanks, and thanks to you personally, Sari, to put this together as professionally as you have.
Pastor Troy, you're next.
Well, again, it takes a team. We have a chaplaincy program here in our city. Chaplain Barry Minardi has taken on a role to help keep things going when it gets overwhelming. Kristen Alexander happens to be my daughter. She also helps run things, and so people really have to make sure that they're getting great people to surround them, or they will not be able to keep up with all the good work. And again, that partnership, and I want to thank you guys for putting this webinar on, because there were so many people in our city who were looking forward to it, and we wanted to hear from the rest of those that are around the country, and thank all of you for the good, hard work you do. And you're literally someone's answer to prayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Troy. Goosebumps. Thank you. I want to say thank you to everyone who has come, who's worked with me, and through my barrage of texts and emails over the past several weeks, for your graciousness to be here, but also the time that each of these panelists put in to prep for this. Probably you don't know sitting here attending, but we had many dry runs and rehearsals and sound checks, and they really did put their heart and soul into this. Sorry, I also want to thank URI North America for having this as part of their program, for the Leadership Council, who is a volunteer board that really takes on a lot of the heavy lifting for different programs that URI North America does, and specifically my subcommittee that helped me work on this, which was Danya Wellman and Sukhvinder Vinning and Monica Willard. So thank them, as they were the kind of invisible bubble surrounding me and all of you. And then just all my thanks aside, a note on just, again, keep an eye on your email. This session is being recorded, so you'll be able to share it or watch it again if you missed a certain part. All the resources will be available to be shared, except for the contact sheet. I do ask that you keep that private, as that has contact information that was okay to be shared in this setting, but not with a broader whole. So that's the only thing that I'll be sending out that really is confidential. Everything else, please pass it around, please share it, and use it in your communities, and report back to us. If you do an event in your community or you're inspired to do something by this webinar, nothing would make me happier than you letting me know that. And also talk to each other. URI is a network, and we believe that we're all better together when we share best practices. So use that contact information that we're sending. Get in touch with me if you're looking for someone else who might be trying to do this work on an interfaith basis. And consider joining URI if you work with an interfaith group that's not already a part of us. Or if you work with a group that maybe doesn't fit our description of a cooperation circle, we have an affiliates program. So I'm here to have any of those discussions with you as well. And just thank you all for coming. Beatrice, you're the next video picture over from me, so I'll hand it to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for all you did to put this together, and thank you to URI for agreeing to take on this issue. It's an important issue. I think that it's really incumbent on every one of us to speak out on trafficking, and it doesn't have to be a heavy lift. If you go and use the resources that you'll receive in connection with this webinar, you'll find that there's some easy things to do, and that the more people you speak with, the more public awareness will build, the more the groundswell of response will be created, and will really be able to make change. You are empowered to make change, but you have to take some kind of action. So do whatever is comfortable for you. It's available, and your passion will result in change.
All right.
Oh, you know what? Elisa's on the phone. I can't see her picture, so I'm forgetting she's here. Elisa, will you say something quickly before Gail goes?
Sure. What I wanted to share, first of all, thank you everyone who's on this, participated in this webinar, who has put it together. I am so honored to be part of this, and I wanted to share some really amazing news. As a result of the of URI's online webinar announcement, a former client that I met over 5 years ago, and I had only seen her the one time. I hadn't seen her since. I hadn't heard from her in over 5 years. But because of this webinar being announced, she reconnected with me today and let me know that, you know, she's safe, and wanted to thank me for helping her find her freedom. So I think that is icing on the cake for me. This is why I work so hard, you know, and I'm so honored to be part of the panelists. You know, I'm probably the oldest one on the panel, but I want to be just like you guys when I grow up. And thank you to everybody who is paying attention, and to all of you who are going to take this information and share it so that you can make a difference too. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think this has been tremendously valuable. Everyone, I want to just echo everyone's gratitude to URI, to Sari. I feel very hopeful. I'm happy I've met Reverend Troy and strengthened my friendship with Beatrice. This is really so hopeful is that we can work together, and by working together we can end the scourge of trafficking.